Negotiations are part of the daily business. The question always is, how do I negotiate properly and how am I able to get the best out of any negotiation? And we have a worldwide traveling global speaker and expert on this topic with us here. Hello and welcome, Derek Arden.
Thanks, Niels. What a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much for taking the time, and I'm getting straight into the topic. Can you just tell us a bit about your background? So where does your negotiation expertise come from?
Well, I worked for Barclays Bank for a number of years, and I was head of large corporate banking, and I got into some really difficult negotiations with the big UK retailers such as Sainsbury's and Tesco's, and I realised that I wasn't as good a negotiator as I thought I was. I realised a lot of my colleagues weren't either. In fact, I knew it was a very understudied subject. So I picked up a book that evening after I was left Tesco's with a flea in my ear and read it. And it was called Everything is Negotiable by a Brit called Gavin Kennedy. At that stage, everybody was buying books from the US, which was hardball negotiation. And this was all about win-win. And at that point, I decided that I was going to study the subject like mad, as hardly anyone was doing that. And that's what I did. And I got passionate about it. I started teaching it while I was working for Barclays. And then when I left Barclays, I decided this would be a fantastic subject to be a global expert at, or at least a British expert at. And that's how it worked. And I've been doing it ever since and having lots of fun.
Excellent, excellent. Of course, we have many international listeners on this podcast, and when they hear UK banking, they probably assume what many people will assume. This man comes from a rich family and then went to Oxford or Cambridge and got thrown into the system from the top. Can you give us a bit of your background, how it really was? Because I know that you have a proper track record.
Yeah, I was thrown out of school at 16, Niels, and my dad marched me down to Barclays Bank and said, can you give my son a job? And I got a job there making the tea for a year. And after that, I got promoted. I started taking my bank exams. I noticed that people weren't doing that. And I qualified as a banker at age 23 and got into all sorts of difficult situations that people 20 years older than me were doing. And I modeled them, followed them, and took all the best bits from them. And so that's actually what happened. I was brought up in a rough, tough part of northwest London, Kensal Rise, in fact, where even the rats carried flick knives, as I like to say when I'm speaking.
So you have a proper track record to negotiate your way into the place where you were and now are. So let's get straight into the topic about negotiations. Many people at this moment and many businesses, of course, due to the pandemic, but also due to other circumstances probably, are struggling right now. And of course, especially what they focus on is price negotiations. And many people at the moment say, oh, it's all about the price. We can only compete on price. What is your take when people say something like that to you?
Well, of course, it's very transactional when people are talking about only price, because there's all sorts of extras and service issues that you can give people, particularly in this day and age where things have become a commodity. And what you want to do is decommoditize your product so that there's extras, so that the service that goes with it. And often these things don't cost very much money, but they make a massive difference. And if all things are equal on price, and they are, we're not talking about pennies or anything, then if things are equal, you're going to go with the person that you trust the best, the person that you know, like, and trust the best, that's got the best track record. And often when people change suppliers, they have a nasty shock unless they have to. So it's the whole package, because if you do take the cheapest price, you might have a nasty surprise and the company may not be able to deliver what you want. So yeah.
Absolutely. So when we talk about trust, many people think it's, of course, and know that trust is very important. But the main question is, how do I gain someone's trust, especially in today's world where, for example, I sometimes have someone on the phone, someone from a purchasing department who I don't know. Maybe it's the first time we met on the phone. And especially in today's times, I can't say, hey, let's meet for a coffee, because that's not possible anymore, especially not during a global pandemic. How do I gain trust of people when I can't do the, hey, let's meet for a coffee kind of approach?
Well, you then say, hey, let's meet on Zoom. That's what I do. So you can look people in the eyes on Zoom. In fact, I've written an article about negotiating on Zoom, which I can send you or any of your listeners, because there are things you can do on Zoom. You're meeting someone. You can control the meeting. You send out the link. So connecting, building rapport, and then you can look them in the eye on Zoom as long as you look in the look at the camera. So you can meet people, and I've used this to my advantage a lot in over the last year, because it really is advantageous. In fact, I'm helping someone with an insurance claim at the moment, a £1.6 million insurance claim, and
wow.
we've met all the parties on Zoom. You can control it, you can see them, you can ask questions, you can watch their reaction to the questions, which is what you want to do when you're finding out if you can trust people, because you can quickly tell if they're spinning it or they're not on top of the facts, etc. And the problem with this insurance claim is that they're not on top of the facts. So in fact, I think I'm going to tell the guy that I'm going to stand down from helping him negotiate it, because he's been pulled between two different lawyers. And I've got to tell you that these lawyers have got their own agenda. And if I told you what their agenda is,
charging fees.
Yeah, absolutely. £550 an hour this guy's charging. And he's telling them to sue them, take them to court, and have 3 days in court. And I said, how much is that going to cost you? £400,000.
Yeah.
And he might not win, and he'll be responsible for the costs. So you can guess what I'm saying to him. You've got to look at the risk reward here very carefully.
Absolutely. So when you now said, and that's a very interesting point, when you said they are not on the top of their facts, how can I find out? Because we all know how it works. Purchasing department tells you, oh, someone else is cheaper than you. You have to lower your price. And you never know, is it true or is it just made up? How do I find out if someone's going to trick me?
Well, it helps if you've got a big network like you and I have got, because sometimes you can usually ask a few people what they think. Now, you can ask questions, and then you have to make a business judgment. You should be on top of your product. You should know roughly what your other suppliers are charging. You should know that. And when I worked in Barclays, I made it my job to know that. And therefore, you've got an idea, and you've got an idea if someone's totally lowballing the price just to gain their business. And if they are, I'd say to them, well, good luck to you. It's lovely to do business with you, but we can't do it at that price. I've got my spreadsheet here, and there's absolutely no way we can produce that product at that price. I don't think they can either. But if they've chosen to lowball the price, then, and you're happy with them and you're happy about the long-term delivery of that product, then I suggest you go with them. But just in case something goes wrong with that, here's my mobile number. If you're worried about anything at any time, then just give me a call. So leave the door open and suggest to them subliminally that they can't do it for that price. But you've got to do that genuinely, Niels. You've got to really know that that's the facts. You can't lie on things like that, or you'll soon get found out of having no integrity.
So when you now talk about walking away from a negotiation, many people say when we focus on win-win, we should always find a solution. And you would then, as far as I heard now, you would disagree and say that there is a point where you have to walk away.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you're not going to be in business for very long if you keep reducing your price. So you need to know, and these are my models, what your best position is. That's your dream position that you might get. Let's say you're Moderna and you've invented COVID drug, then you know what your highest position is, depending on your integrity, whether you think this is going to solve it for the whole world. But that's another issue we could get into. What your target price is, the price you'd like to get, and the price where you would leave the table, for the simple reason you can't make money on it. It's not business. But what's very useful is to look at your walkaway position against your alternative position, sometimes called a BATNA by Harvard, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So if I do walk away from this, what am I going to do with the resources? What am I going to do with my time? What am I going to do with the machinery? And therefore, maybe you want to think about apportioning not quite so many fixed costs to that product if we're talking about a manufactured product, just to keep the business, just to keep the turnover. But that's a calculation and a business decision that you ought to produce a business case for, and just look at the alternatives before you turn it down. I always say, don't just say no to something, have a stand back, sleep on it, and just look at the alternatives and see if you really want to do business. Is there other business you might get? Is there other products you might sell by using it as a loss leader? But to answer your question, yes, you must walk away sometimes
And now, of course, my question will be, how do I find out my walk-away position? Because let's face it, let's say you are a salesperson, so you're working for a business. The business owner will tell you, get the business. So how do I find out what my walk-away position is? Because we all know when someone finds out that you walked away from one person, but did the business with someone else, then they might be very upset about what you've done. So how do I find a sustainable walk-away position which really works?
Well, you've got to do the numbers, haven't you? You've actually got to do the numbers. You've got to find out where your break-even price is, which is an accounting issue, but very, very important. You've got your fixed costs of your machinery anyway, which you've got to apportion. Then you've got your variable costs, which are the costs that go with just the production. And therefore, you need to work out what they are. Now, you can do this roughly on the back of an envelope, really. It's not rocket science. The accountants would tell you it's rocket science, but you can do it roughly. You would need to be in that ballpark. But at which point, when I sell this product at the end of the month or end of the 3 months, am I going to be losing money? Because if I'm going to be losing money, I just shouldn't be doing that. And what profit do I want? What return on investment do I want? Do I want a 10% margin? 5% margin, and then you get on that slippery slope and you're down to a 2% margin, and you haven't got enough room to maneuver. So it's got to be done. And it's got to be done really by the business leaders. It's the chief executive's job, really, isn't it? If it's a big product, there's no point sending out salespeople with sales targets. They should have return on capital, return on investment targets, which is not that difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are very, very, very important words, because I often still hear when I talk to salespeople, 90% still have revenue goals. So you would agree that revenue goals are not very helpful because you have to focus on profit rather than revenue.
Absolutely. When I was negotiating with Barclays and some big deals, I could tell which of my competitors had revenue deals rather than return on investment deals, profitability deals. They would just had sales targets. Well, that's fine, isn't it? And often salespeople are very good at talking to the boss and getting the price down, and just to hit their sales targets. I don't know which guru said it. I think it was Tom Peters or you, Neil. Is that people get judged on people get paid on what they're measured on rather than the profitability.
Absolutely. And talking about negotiating internationally, and to round this interview up, you have written a book which, correct me when I'm wrong, your book is available in 26 countries. Is that correct?
Well, the book's available in every English language country, and it's also available in Bulgaria, China, and Arabic. I don't think it's been translated into French and German, but I think the French and German negotiators would probably rather not hear it from a Brit. But So
can you tell us a bit more, just to round this interview, what is the book about, and why should people read your book?
Okay, well, the book's called Win-Win: How to Get a Winning Result from Persuasive Negotiations. And it covers my 30 years as a negotiator, and it took 2 years to write. And when Pearson approached me and asked me to write it, because they'd looked at all my social media and my track record, they told me they weren't asking anybody else, did I want to do it or not? I wouldn't earn much money out of it. It was all about the kudos. And I said I would like to cover everything I can in it, because I didn't want to write any more books, no sequels. So I put into the book all I'd learned in a structure that made it easy to read. They put an index in the back, and I urge people, if they buy it, and I'd love it if people did buy it, to go to the index first and look at the index and read something first of all to get momentum, like body language. How do you tell people if they're lying? Or the influencing chapter, which is linked to the work of Robert Cialdini, which is absolutely vital in sales, that the person likes you and you do all those tips. And I put a chapter in it also about using your brain. And the editor wanted to delete it. She said to me, what does that have to do with negotiating? And I said, it has a lot to do with negotiating, because using mind maps, brainstorming, how the left and the right brain works, taking breaks, taking time outs to make good decisions is vital. Anyway, she came back and agreed with me. So it's got a chapter in there which is more linked to the Tony Buzan thinking model. But that's so important in a negotiation. You've got to think outside the box. You've got to find alternative solutions. Because you asked me about walk away, but before you walk away, you've got to think about, how else might I do this? They've asked me to do something. Can I persuade them to do it in a different way, in a way that will make a profit for me and a profit for them? So, yeah, I put it all in. I put everything in there I'd learned, including a chapter on international negotiations. Basically, the real issue with international negotiations is to find out where the other person's coming from, find out their cultures. And I must tell you a story about flying to Dusseldorf once. I flew to Dusseldorf to see a German company that had a big UK subsidiary. And I got picked up at the airport by a German who lost his way to see the company. We arrived 5 minutes late. Well, they were not interested in talking to us, even though we'd come all the way from Heathrow, because we were 5 minutes late. Now,
I can fully feel that as a German.
Yeah, I mean, but the problem was, it was a Barclays German guy that couldn't find his way to their office. So we were steaming. And then you go to the Middle East, Niels, and if you're 2 days late, that's kind of okay sometimes, isn't it? Well, the Arabs might be.
Yeah, in Germany, we don't have the concept of ish. 9-ish doesn't exist in Germany. When you say we meet at 10 a.m., you better show up at 9:55 because anything else is late.
And I support that 100%, because that just makes good business sense, doesn't it?
Excellent. These are perfect final words for this podcast. Of course, I'm going to put your contact details in the show notes of this podcast so people can contact you directly if they have any further inquiries, want to talk to you, have an article or book you as a speaker, trainer, or coach, which I highly recommend. So at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing for me left to say. Derek, thank you very much for your time.
And Niels, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you and to your listeners. It's been my pleasure.